I always thought life inside our old family house would stay predictable forever. The same hallways, the same morning routines, the same quiet evenings where I sat near the window waiting for someone to ask how my day was, but no one ever did. The house was full of people, yet somehow I was the one person who always felt unseen. My partner had grown distant over the years, busy in work, busy in everything except me. And somewhere between the noise of responsibilities and the silence inside my chest, I learned to live without expecting attention from anyone. Maybe that was why I didn't think much the first time the tenant from the upper portion said he needed to meet me personally about the rent. He usually sent money through bank transfer. Straightforward, quick, but this time he texted early in the morning, "I need to talk to you in person, if you're free today." Nothing else. No explanation. Something about the message made me pause. There was a softness in it, a carefulness, like he wasn't just talking about rent. Still, I didn't let my mind wander. I simply replied, "Come any time after noon." When the clock hit 1, I heard footsteps in the courtyard. Not the rushed kind, not the loud careless kind, his steps were always steady, calm, like he carried his own kind of silence with him. I straightened my clothes, not because I was expecting anything unusual, but because his presence always carried a kind of seriousness that made me aware of myself. A knock followed, gentle and patient. I opened the door, and there he stood, taller than I remembered, wearing a simple shirt, eyes that always seemed to observe more than he spoke. He offered a small greeting, and I felt a strange flutter in my chest that I quickly pushed away. He stepped inside, and for a moment neither of us said anything. He looked around the room, not in judgment, just noticing the small things, my books stacked on the corner chair, the half-opened window letting in light, the faint sound of children playing outside. Then his gaze settled on me. It wasn't intense or improper, just honest, and honesty can be disarming in ways people don't realize. "I came about the rent," he finally said, but even as he spoke, it sounded like the rent was only half the reason he was here. I nodded and sat down, gesturing for him to take the opposite chair. He didn't. He remained standing for a moment, as if gathering words. "I actually wanted to explain something." His voice carried a weight I hadn't heard from him before. I waited. He slowly sat down then, elbows resting lightly on his knees. "You've always been kind whenever I needed extra time or had questions. I know I don't say much, but I notice it." His words were unexpected. Tenants didn't talk like this. But the way he said it didn't feel like compliment, it felt like gratitude. Raw, sincere. Before I could respond, he continued, "I might be late with the rent this month." The admission didn't surprise me, but the hesitation in his voice did. He wasn't embarrassed, he was worried about how I would react, worried about causing trouble. I assured him there was no issue, that he could take some extra days. A simple response, something anyone would say. But when I said it, he looked at me in a way that made the room feel slightly warmer. "You always make difficult things look easier," he murmured, almost to himself. And for some reason, hearing that made something inside me soften. No one at home spoke to me with that tone. No one noticed small things about me anymore. Yet here was this man, someone who wasn't family, who wasn't close, and somehow he saw what others didn't. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was heavy but soft, like the pause before rain. I found myself studying him, his calm posture, the tiredness in his eyes, the way he ran a hand over his forehead as if battling thoughts he didn't want to say out loud. There was something vulnerable about him, something familiar, something I recognized in myself. He finally said, "It's not just the rent, I needed to talk to someone." I didn't know who else. And suddenly, it didn't feel like a conversation between landlord and tenant anymore. It felt personal, unexpectedly personal. My pulse quickened, not out of fear, but because I realized I was listening too closely, caring too deeply. When he stood up to leave, he didn't head directly for the door. He paused near me, just a step closer than necessary. I felt his presence before I looked up. He said quietly, "Thank you. You don't know how much it means." His voice held something unspoken, something that lingered in the room even after he walked out into the sunlight. After he left, I sat there for a long time, trying to convince myself it was nothing. Just a conversation about rent. Just a man going through a hard time. But deep down, something had shifted. Something small, fragile, and dangerously warm. And without admitting it, I knew that meeting him had awakened a part of me I thought had died long ago. For the rest of the day, I kept replaying our conversation in my mind, trying to understand why it affected me so deeply. It was just a normal discussion about rent, at least on the surface. But something about the way he spoke, the way he looked at me as if he genuinely saw me, had lodged itself somewhere inside me and refused to leave. I scolded myself for thinking too much, yet my mind kept drifting back to him again and again. By evening, the house was loud with movement but empty of warmth. Everyone was busy, someone on the phone, someone watching TV, someone arguing in the kitchen. My partner asked nothing about my day, not even a passing question. I wanted to tell myself that I was used to it, that nothing had changed. But something had changed, not in the house, in me. After dinner, as I was cleaning the table, my phone buzzed. A message. When I wiped my hands and checked the screen, my heart skipped slightly. It was him. I hope I didn't bother you today. Just one line, simple and polite. But it carried that same careful tone, that gentle hesitation he always had. I typed back quickly, telling him it was no problem at all. I expected that to be the end of it, but another message followed almost immediately. I didn't mean to keep you for so long. I ended up talking more than I planned. I stared at the words longer than I should have. He wasn't just making conversation, he was revealing something, maybe guilt, maybe respect, maybe something he couldn't fully express. I found myself replying again, telling him he could talk whenever he needed. And with that simple sentence, something opened between us. He told me about the job he had lost, how the company had downsized, how he had worked there for 5 years, how everything felt unstable now. He wasn't complaining. He spoke with honesty, with a quiet frustration that felt real. I could feel the heaviness behind his words, the exhaustion of trying to stay calm when life was slipping out of order. I listened, really listened, and wrote messages that were as honest as his. Before I realized it, our conversation stretched past midnight. I didn't even remember the last time I had spoken that long to anyone. When he finally wrote, "You should sleep. Thank you for giving me your time," something warm settled in my chest. I turned off the phone but couldn't sleep for a long time after. The next day passed strangely. Every time my phone lit up, I half expected his name to appear. When it finally did, late afternoon, my pulse quickened in a way I couldn't control. "Are you busy?" I wasn't, but I hesitated before answering. Why? I didn't want to seem too eager, but I also didn't want him to think he was disturbing me. I wrote back that I was free. His reply came instantly. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" I assumed he meant texting, but a moment later, his voice note appeared. My breath caught. I hadn't heard his voice up close like that before, calm, slightly tired, layered with something soft. He thanked me again for yesterday and said he didn't have many people to talk to. "I don't really open up to others," he admitted. "But it felt easy with you." Those words echoed inside me. Easy with me. It wasn't flirtation, it was vulnerability. For some reason, it struck deeper than any compliment could. As days passed, our conversations became routine. Not intentionally, they just happened. Sometimes short, sometimes long, sometimes nothing more than simple check-ins. But every time, I felt something inside me growing, something that made me more aware of myself, more aware of him. One evening, I ran into him in the courtyard. I wasn't expecting to see him. He was locking his motorcycle, the sunlight catching the side of his face. When he turned and saw me, his expression changed subtly, his shoulders relaxed, his eyes softened. He walked up, and for a moment, we simply exchanged a quiet greeting. Then he said, "I wanted to thank you properly, for everything." His voice was steadier than usual, yet there was emotion behind it. I told him it was nothing, but he shook his head. "You helped me more than you know." And then, almost unconsciously, he reached out and touched my hand, just for a second, just a gesture of gratitude, but the warmth of it lingered far longer than it should have. I didn't move. I didn't speak. Neither did he. We simply stood there, a moment suspended between us, heavy with meaning yet lacking any words to define it. When he finally stepped back, I felt disappointment, relief, guilt, and longing all at once, an impossible mix I couldn't name. That night, I didn't sleep easily. I kept replaying that moment, the way his fingertips brushed mine, the look in his eyes, the quiet intensity of his gratitude. I knew something was changing, something dangerous, something forbidden. But the truth was harsher than that. I didn't want it to stop. The days that followed felt unreal, as if I were walking through a life that looked familiar but didn't feel like mine anymore. Every sound of footsteps on the stairs made my heart jump. Every message on my phone made my pulse race. I kept telling myself it was harmless, that people talked, that conversations didn't mean anything, that loneliness sometimes created illusions. But deep down, I knew this wasn't an illusion. Something real was growing, something I could no longer pretend not to feel. One late afternoon, while I was folding clothes in my room, my phone buzzed. His name appeared on the screen. "If you're free, could we talk for a bit? In person." My hands froze. He had never asked to meet again privately. I didn't know why my heart reacted the way it did, half fear, half longing. I typed back slowly, telling him I had a few minutes. When I walked toward the stairs that led to the upper portion, my steps felt heavier than usual. I kept reminding myself that he was just a tenant, that this was just a conversation about rental problems or something ordinary. But in my chest, nothing felt ordinary. When I reached the top, he was standing near the doorway, waiting. His posture was tense, his expression unreadable. But when he saw me, something softened in his eyes, something that made me inhale sharply. He gestured for me to come inside. I stepped in, noticing how quiet the place was, how the late evening light spilled across the floor, how it felt strangely intimate even though nothing had happened. For a moment, we simply stood near each other without speaking. It was he who finally broke the silence. "I didn't call you here for rent," he said quietly. I whispered, "I know." He seemed surprised by my answer, as if he expected me to deflect. Instead, he walked to the small table and sat down, resting his hands in front of him. I sat opposite him, keeping a safe distance, though the distance felt like a fragile thread neither of us wanted to touch. "I've been thinking a lot," he said. "About the past few days. About the way we talk. About the way I feel when I'm around you." My breath caught. His voice wasn't bold, it shook, just slightly. He wasn't confessing something dramatic, he was revealing something he had tried not to admit. He continued, "I know I shouldn't say this. I know it's wrong. I know your life is separate from mine. But I can't pretend anymore. Talking to you has become the one thing I look forward to." He looked down, as if ashamed. "I didn't plan it. I didn't want it, but it happened." My hands trembled slightly in my lap. I tried to speak but the words wouldn't come. He looked up then, meeting my eyes with a sincerity that shook me to my core. "I don't expect anything from you," he said. "I just needed to be honest." His honesty was like a sudden wind, quiet but powerful, sweeping away the excuses I had been hiding behind. I felt my heart beating too fast, too loud, as if it could be heard across the room. "I've been lonely," I whispered, surprising even myself. "Not just recently. For a long time." He listened without interrupting. "I know," he said softly. I could see it. I felt tears sting my eyes, not sadness, not joy, just the weight of finally being seen. The room fell into a silence that wasn't empty. It was full of everything we had been avoiding, everything we had been afraid to name. He reached forward, very slowly, as if giving me time to stop him. His fingers lightly brushed the back of my hand. This time, I didn't move away. His touch was gentle, hesitant, almost trembling. Not demanding, never demanding. Just needing a moment of truth. "Tell me if I'm crossing a line," he whispered. I should have pulled back. I should have stood up, walked downstairs, closed the door, ended everything. But I stayed. My hand stayed beneath his. And in that stillness, in that fragile moment, something inside me finally broke. "You're not," I said. His breath escaped him in a way that felt like relief and fear all at once. He held my hand more firmly then, not tightly, just enough for me to feel the warmth of his palm against mine. The closeness felt dangerous, but also like the first real breath I had taken in years. He leaned forward, not touching me more, just lowering his voice. "I care about you more than I should," he admitted. "And it scares me." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the weight of his words settle. When I opened them, he was looking at me with a tenderness that made my heart ache. "We can't," I began, but my voice wavered. "I know," he said. "But it doesn't change how I feel." The room felt too small for everything happening between us, yet too perfect for this moment to exist anywhere else. I pulled my hand back slowly, but the warmth remained. When I finally stood up to leave, he rose with me, as if not ready to let the moment end. At the door, he spoke again, softly. "We need to talk again. Not about rent. About us." His words followed me down the stairs, echoing in my chest long after I returned to my room. I knew something irreversible had happened. Something I couldn't undo even if I tried. And I wasn't sure I wanted to undo it. For the next 2 days, I tried to go about life as if nothing had changed, but everything inside me had shifted. The house felt different. The walls felt closer. Every routine felt heavier. Even my partner's presence felt like a reminder of the distance I had been living with for so long. I moved through my chores automatically, yet my thoughts kept drifting back to him, his voice, the way he looked at me, the confession that had slipped from his heart with such raw honesty. I didn't message him, and he didn't message me either. But the silence between us wasn't empty. It was filled with everything we hadn't said yet, everything we were afraid to acknowledge. Whenever I passed by a window facing the upper portion, I wondered if he was there, wondering the same. My heart felt suspended in something unnamed, something fragile. On the third evening, as I stepped outside to hang some clothes, I heard movement above me. A door opened. A pause. Then footsteps slowly coming down the stairs. I froze for a second, my hands still holding the wet cloth. He appeared quietly, stopping a few steps above the ground. He didn't speak at first. He simply stood there, as if unsure whether approaching me was the right thing to do. When our eyes met, the air shifted again. "I'm leaving," he said softly. The words hit me harder than I expected. "Leaving," I repeated, unable to hide the shock. He nodded and came down the remaining steps until he stood a few feet away, keeping a respectful distance but carrying a heaviness in his posture. I found a small room near my new job. "It's not much, but it's enough for now. I'm moving tomorrow." I wasn't prepared for that. Even though I knew we couldn't continue the way things were going, the thought of him disappearing from the same space, from the same air, from my everyday life, it struck me unexpectedly deep. "You didn't tell me," I whispered. He breathed in slowly. "I didn't want to make it harder," he said. "For you, or for me." I looked away, unable to maintain the eye contact that felt too honest, too revealing. A part of me knew this was the right decision, for both of us. But knowing didn't soften the ache spreading quietly inside my chest. "I didn't want to leave without saying goodbye," he added. "Without telling you something." My heart tightened again. "What is it?" He stepped a little closer, his voice gentle but steady. "No matter what happens after today, I want you to know you changed something in me. You made me feel understood at a time when I felt completely alone. I won't forget that." I felt my throat tighten. His words weren't dramatic. They weren't exaggerated. They were simple, sincere, and somehow that made them hurt more. "I don't know what to say," I murmured. He shook his head softly. "You don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know." A silence settled between us again, this time filled with finality. I realized then that this was goodbye, not just to him, but to whatever fragile connection we had allowed to grow. A connection built on loneliness, honesty, and moments we were never supposed to share. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small folded note. "If you ever feel overwhelmed," he said, "read this. It's nothing special. Just a few words I needed to say but couldn't trust myself to say out loud." I hesitated, then took the note from him. Our fingers didn't touch this time, and that small absence made the moment even more bittersweet. He stepped back slowly, his expression filled with something I couldn't name, regret, affection, restraint, maybe all at once. "Take care of yourself," he said quietly. "You too," I managed. And just like that, he turned and walked up the stairs. I watched him go, each step taking him further away from the fragile space we had built inside our silences. When he disappeared inside the upper portion, I felt something inside me fall still, like a chapter closing. Later that night, when the house finally grew quiet, I sat on my bed and unfolded the note. His handwriting was slightly uneven, as if written in a rush of emotion. Some people enter our lives quietly but leave an echo that never fades. Thank you for being the one moment of light in a time when everything felt dark. I hope you find the happiness you give to others, I won't forget. I read those lines several times, each time feeling a mixture of gratitude and sorrow. It wasn't a love letter. It wasn't a promise. It was an acknowledgement of what we were, what we almost became, and what we chose not to cross. When I folded the note and kept it safely inside my drawer, I knew one thing for certain: What had happened between us wasn't something to regret or hide in shame. It was a moment of truth in a life full of silence. He left the next morning. I didn't watch him go, I couldn't. But the emptiness in the courtyard told me he was gone. Life slowly returned to normal, but I didn't feel the same. Something inside me had awakened, a reminder that I was still human, still capable of feeling deeply, still deserving of being seen.
And though our story never truly began, it would stay with me like a quiet echo, soft, bittersweet, unforgettable.